Okay, welcome to joint webinar, CommScope, Telrad. As you know, we're stepping towards very interesting times. October 17th is just around the corner. Lots of excitement and plenty of anxiety. My name is Alex Frelichman. I'm a VP of Sales at Telrad Networks. I would like to welcome Rashid and Andrew with CommScope. Rashid is Director of Business Development, as well as Andrew, Director of CBRS Business Unit. Those two gentlemen going to lead CommScope's portion of the presentation, and after that, we will talk a little bit about Telrad, just to give a quick update on where we stand, what we're doing today, where we are progress-wise, as well as leave Q&A towards the very end. All lines are muted. If you have any questions, feel free to push them through. We will try to address the questions as we go, if it's something kind of relevant within the scope of the conversation. Otherwise, we're just gonna leave them towards the end, and we will try to make sure that we complete within 1 hour. All right, on that note, Rashid, Andrew, please take it.
Great, thank you, Alex and Telrad team. Thank you for having us on and for this opportunity to speak to your customers today. So we have a nice few topics lined up here. The last time we spoke to your customer base was, I believe, back in January or February. The ecosystem has obviously matured quite a bit, so we have a slightly different agenda, digging a little deeper into some of the more interesting topics that are coming up these days. So we'll still, we recognizing that not everybody on this call might be, as deep into CBRS as CommScope and Telrad are. We have just a couple of slides on a brief introduction to CBRS in case anybody's not up to speed, and then we'll get into CommScope's specific offering on CBRS. We'll touch slightly on the onboarding process so that you know what are the basic steps, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the Part 90 transition. That's the hot topic right now. You also mentioned October 17th, which relates to that, and then we'll kind of walk you through some reasons why you should select CommScope. And then at the end of this slide deck, we have an offer for Telrad customers that we're very excited about. So I'm going to do a little bit of that TV thing and leave that for the end. So stick around through this presentation, and in about 45 minutes, when we get toward the end of our portion, we'll talk about that. But this will be shared by Telrad to its customers after the webinar as well. So what is CBRS? It's stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service. It's a unique new spectrum sharing scheme introduced by obviously the FCC and the industry, the U.S. telecom industry, in partnership with CBRS Alliance, Wind Forum, all these different industry associations. So it's a system of 3 different users. As you might know, this spectrum was traditionally used by the DoD, and there were some grandfathered users that had part of the spectrum. 50 megahertz of the total 150 megahertz was grandfathered for some of the WISPs and other wireless users, mostly in rural areas. What CBRS adds is commercial users, and there are 2 classes of those. One is the first priority goes to the priority access users, priority access license or PAL users, and then there are the GAA users, general authorized access users, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Spectrum Access System, or SAS, kind of goes to the heart of the overall CBRS architecture. This is, like I said, spectrum sharing is new, and this is the new piece that was never there for, in traditional spectrum that, different operators would go and bid on and purchase from the FCC. They never required a SAS because that was, spectrum is basically given to you and it's at your disposal. Here, there are lots of moving pieces, and somebody has to police and ensure that, number one, that the incumbents, the DoD especially, aren't impacted, that they have unencumbered usage of the spectrum at all times, and then it has to make sure that the spectrum is fairly allocated between PAL users who have the second priority, and then the GAA users. So in the center of this diagram here, you see the SAS, where all the different types of devices known as CBSDs will connect, register before they can start transmitting in the CBRS band. And then behind the SAS, which is shown on the left side of this diagram, is the ESC network. So that's a very important piece of it to protect the incumbents, basically the naval radar or naval fleet carriers. That's the rub, right? Like, you have to have sensors all along the 3 US coastlines to make sure that we're listening for any of those radars approaching the coast. And when they do, then the ESC network basically alerts the SAS, and the SAS takes mitigating actions to protect that incumbent entering in a certain dynamic protection area, or a DPA. So that's a huge investment for any SAS provider, and today only 3 of the leading SAS providers have ESC networks deployed, and CommScope obviously is one of them. This slide here shows a little bit more of how many different channels there are, and the whole spectrum. So it's goes from 3550 megahertz to 3700 megahertz. The lower 100 megahertz, 3550 to 3650, that's where the PAL users are. So there are a total 15 channels. 7 of these, the first 10, are going to be PAL users, and those can be dynamically allocated, and there are reasons for those. I won't get into that, why those are dynamic and they can move around, but it's basically to allow room for at least 3 channels available for the incumbent or for DoD. So all the PALs reside in the first lower 100 megahertz, and then the GAA channels can be anywhere. And if there aren't any PAL users in a given area, if the PAL licenses haven't been taken up, or PAL winners in those areas have not deployed any radios, then all 15 channels, or all 150 megahertz is open for the GAA users. So that's the biggest advantage of this spectrum, where you're basically getting usage of a very valuable spectrum for free. Just a overall recap of where the ecosystem is today. So it's on the right hand side of the screen, you see the notice that the FCC released on January 27th, 2020, basically the beginning of this year. That was announcing the first wave certifications. CommScope, if you look closely on this notice somewhere, you see CommScope's name. So first wave of SAS and ESC administrators were certified, and basically that's when the ICD or initial commercial deployment was over, and it was announced that now SAS or CBRS is available for commercial use through these different SAS users. So that has been proceeding very well. There have been a lot of deployments already. And then the next big milestone was what happened this week with the conclusion of the PAL auction. And that was, astounding results. A lot of people were speculating that the auction will, the proceeds will go up to 2 billion, maybe 3 billion, and it almost hit 5 billion. So that shows you the interest in the industry, and kind of already points to the success of this band. And then the last major milestone that's coming up, and sure a lot of you on this call are interested in that, is the grandfather period for most grandfathered WISPs, most users, is ending on October 17th. So after October 17th, you either have to stop using your grandfather status, or you should be using the SAS, the Spectrum Access System, to follow the CBRS rules as they stand today. Okay, now we'll kind of dig into what a SAS is and our SAS in specific. So with that, Andrew, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Rashid. I'll talk a little bit more about the CommScope SAS and ESC system, and kind of what makes us unique and what stands us out apart from our competitors. At the core, the SAS is operating on the cloud. Our SAS is hosted by Amazon Web Services, and it sits in the AWS data centers. So these are cloud-based computing nodes, which inherently give us high availability. There's multiple copies of these nodes running. They're distributed across multiple availability zones. An availability zone is basically a geographically separated data center in the AWS zone, or the AWS world. So one SAS is distributed across multiple physical facilities that are distributed or separated, such that if there's any major event in a neighborhood, a power outage, a storm, a natural disaster, we have another data center that's already online, and that the SAS is already running across those multiple data centers. There's no failover time. The nodes are already distributed there. It's all a virtual machine based system, so that allows us to very easily scale and add more services. We use a microservice architecture, which is a series of loosely coupled small services that perform one task. And then you have multiple copies of those services that give you scale. That allows us to scale up and down very quickly and easily. If we need to do more processing at one particular time of the day, we can add more processing nodes automatically. If we need to scale back, we can do that as well. The SAS has been built out of the gate to support 10 million CBSDs. So that's kind of what everything's been designed and sized for. We're nowhere close to that yet. But that growth and that capacity is there and built into the system. With the microservice architecture as well, it gives us the opportunity to do in-service upgrades without any downtime. We can upgrade on a service by service level. We don't have to take down the whole system and bring up a new one, or upgrade a secondary version of the SAS and switch over to it. We do it on a service by service basis. So each service, you would bring up a copy of a new service, and then you take down the old copy of the same service, and you do that one by one. And it allows you to do a full upgrade without any interruption in service or any downtime. Everything is distributed in the processing behind load balancers, and we use redundant load balancers from AWS. So messages come in, a load balancer decides where to send those messages to which service, and then if the load balancer gets an indication that the service did not respond to that request, it can automatically redirect that request to another service. So typical with most web-based services, the load balancers provide that traffic management to make sure that all messages are serviced properly. Redundancy is throughout. Of course, there's hardware redundancy provided by AWS. There's software redundancy provided by our different microservices and different copies of those microservices. And then all the databases are redundant as well. It's a live primary, secondary database configuration that's updated regularly. We also pay great attention to security. All connections are encrypted. All data is encrypted both in transit and at rest. And all data is segmented by carrier. We have one SAS that runs the entire country, so all operators on the country are connected to the same SAS, and that's needed because of a lot of the rules with the FCC are around aggregate interference protection, not just one carrier at a time, but the combination of all carriers. So there's a lot of segmentation built into the SAS such that one operator's data doesn't interfere with another operator's data in terms of access. There's a least privileged access, and there's a restricted access capability that's built in such that carrier A cannot see carriers B data and vice versa. A lot of the redundancy and high availability that we have built in the SAS, we also have built into our ESC network. As Rashid mentioned, we have sensors deployed all around the three coasts of the US, the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf coasts, that their job is to look out into the ocean and look for any offshore naval radar activity. And if that's detected, they report that back through the core to the SAS. And then the SAS can make adjustments to any CBSDs that might be computed to be interfering with that incumbent. But the sensor network that we have is redundant as well. There's at least 2 sensors that are covering all the DPAs, and then within the sensors themselves, we have things like battery backup. We have 48 hours of battery backup, which was actually key in some of the hurricane events that happened recently in the Gulf. We were able to keep those sites up even though the commercial power services had run down with the battery backup, and then we maintain that system as well as a SAS, by a 7x24 support team. So this is a cloud-based system, very scalable, highly redundant, and we pay great attention to security. So moving on to the next slide, Rashid. One of the things that we think makes us unique in CommScope, being CommScope and a large telecommunication company, it's been around for over 40 years, is that we have a lot of infrastructure already in place that a startup or someone new to the telecommunications or wireless industry may not have. And one of those is our quality management system. As far as we know, we are the only SaaS provider that has a TL9000 certified quality system. And this comes with all of the rules and guidelines and processes in place, both for development as well as operation. And we have regular audits and regular quality team that makes sure that we're developing, deploying, operating our product using those quality standards. Our team as well, most of the team that developed the SAS and ESC and are also supporting it, kind of cut their teeth on a lot of other products within CommScope that had a high availability requirement. One to note is a lot of the team came out of our E911 product. We built systems that would geolocate mobile phones that dial 911 such that the person calling, they could be directed to emergency personnel to help them. Their location information we provided to the emergency personnel. We originally did that on some of the old 2G and 3G systems before GPS was in the handset, and then we evolved that to GPS as well. But as you can imagine, that was a 5 nines availability system. There were lives at stake if you had a person that was having an emergency and their location needed to be computed accurately and provided dependably to the emergency operators so that they can service that person in a life-threatening situation. So we have experience in building these high availability networks. And as I mentioned, CommScope has a very mature customer support team. Our 7x24 tier 1 help desk is staffed by real humans. It's someone actually answers the phone or replies to the email directly to the requester, and that team services all CommScope products. And then they have a direct path to our tier 2 team, which is highly specialized in the SAS and ESC products, and they've got the expertise to directly handle all of the details of the SAS and ESC if there's an issue that needs to be addressed there. And our development team is all in-house. We do all of our software development with CommScope employees. They're not offshore contractors, and that team is available with us and with our tier 2 team to support any issues that might come up. And then we, as CommScope, we offer a number of online resources. If you don't want to contact the personnel directly, we have a portal for customers where you can get training videos and documentation as well, just to support the product. We pride ourselves on our support, and we want to be there for customers and with any questions and any support that needs, not only to support the SaaS, but to support your deployment. We want to be part of the solution, not just the SaaS provider. We view ourselves more as a partner. As far as our offering, the SaaS is offered as a full service offering. It's not a piece of hardware you buy. It's not a piece of software that you need to install on an existing server. This is a full service that we provide. So CommScope owns and maintains all of the SAS and the ESC equipment. We're responsible for all of the monitoring of that equipment, any kind of upgrades to that hardware, software upgrades. We do all of the KPI tracking. We do all the scaling and monitoring of that. So that's something you don't have to worry about. Your CBSDs connect to the SAS over the internet, over a secure internet connection, but everything behind the scenes, there's CommScope's responsible for that. And that includes regular software updates. We're in the process now of developing the new features that are part of WinForm Release 2. Some new stuff that's coming along from WinForm protocol updates, support for things, including GAA coexistence, which is a big topic in the CBRS industry of how do we get better use of the GAA spectrum to avoid interference? How do we optimize that portion, that lower tier of the 3-tier CBRS model that Rashid mentioned? We also offer some engineering services that will help in deployment planning. We have RF engineers on staff that can do a full RF design and deployment if you'd like, but we can also have options for scale down from that, where you may have the question of, well, I'm interested in deploying CBRS. I understand there's a lot of rules around this. So how can I be assured that I'll get some spectrum? It's shared spectrum. How much spectrum might I be able to get? And we do some modeling and have some services available, some tools available, which I'll show you in a subsequent slide about what we do there. We also are a CPI Training Program Administrator. So all Category B, the outdoor high-powered CBSDs, require a certified professional installer to install that equipment. And some Category A's, the lower power and indoor units, may require a CPI. And there's a training program associated with that, which we'll show you what CommScope has to offer with that as well. Just one word on pricing. Rashid will give you some pricing details in a second, but we do price on a per CBSD basis. Now, if you know anything about CBRS and you read it about a little bit, there's a whole lot of rules. Not only what's coming out of the FCC, but then on all of the derivatives of that that come into the WinForm documents. And there's all these different incumbents. There's different thresholds for interference into the incumbents, different rules for how incumbents are protected, how everybody kind of gets along, how the SAS is notified of incumbent use or detects incumbent use. And if you look at it on the surface and you say, this is all complicated. But if we the job of the SAS is to organize those rules, to figure out, make sense of them all, and that's really the fundamental work that it's doing. It's looking at all the CBSDs, looking at all the incumbents, looking at all the rules, looking at the PAL users, looking at the GAA users, and trying to optimize the use of that spectrum so that everybody gets what they want and no one interferes with one another. But one of the things that we hear a lot is, okay, I got all these rules. I don't know how they may apply to me, but I want to deploy somewhere. How can I be assured that there's going to be spectrum available to me when I deploy before I invest all the capital? And one of the services that we offer is what we call our spectrum availability analysis. And that is a service where we will take a look at your deployment. We'll take a look at the sites that you're proposing, the areas that you're proposing, and compare those to the rules. We'll run them basically through the same algorithms that the SAS uses and try to get an idea of how much spectrum might be available. We do that on two levels. One, we'll do it on kind of the state of CBRS today. So what CBSDs are deployed today, but we'll also look forward. We'll look forward to a mature network, kind of 5 years down the road. And that's important because a lot of the incumbent protection rules are based on aggregate interference, meaning it's not just your CBSD interfering into the incumbent, but it's the contribution of your CBSD plus your competitors or the neighbor CBSDs that are around the area. The SAS has to take all those into account when determining the interference levels into an incumbent. So you may be deployed today and you may be the only one around, and yeah, just you're the only one contributing to interference. So yeah, there's no interference, there's no issue with your network. But 5 years down the road, there might be 10, 100, 1,000 times more sites in that area, and those have to be considered. You'd like to know that up front. You'd like to know that, okay, in this area, 5 years from now, I may not have the same spectrum that I'm going to have today, such that you can plan accordingly and make the right business decisions. So one of the things we do is we model that, and we use a series of models based on population density and morphology, as well as factoring in terrain and future plans for incumbents and where they're going, to try to predict how much spectrum might be available. And we'll give you things in a tabular format, as well as kind of some of these graphical map formats that says, okay, these areas shouldn't be a problem with spectrum. But if you're deploying in these areas, these red areas, for example, on the top plot, that might be an issue. There might be you might be causing interference there, and you may want to think more about either the channels that you're using or your deployment in that area. Maybe things you can do with down tilt or azimuth or the site density to avoid that interference, and that's something we can help with. Can also help with planning for move lists. The move lists are the dynamic nature of CBRS. That ESC network that's around the coast that's looking for offshore naval activity, the SAS only takes action if the ESC detects that Navy is using an overlapping frequency. So it's dynamic. Most of the time there's nothing going on. The full spectrum in the lower 100 megahertz is available. If the ESC detects the Navy's using channel 3, for example, it reports that to the SAS, and then the SAS has to look at what CBSDs are also using channel 3 that are on what's called the move list. And the move list is a pre-computed list of sites that would have to move or change channels if the Navy is using that overlapping channel. So that's something as well that you'd like to know before you deploy. If I deploy in this area, what's the probability that I'm going to be impacted by the Navy if I'm in there? And there may be steps you can take there as well to get off of the move list. Again, with down tilt or site height, antenna height, maybe transmit power, maybe azimuth. If you knew beforehand, my default configuration puts me on the move list, there's a chance I could be impacted by the Navy, but if I make these adjustments, maybe I can get off of the move list. That's valuable information. So that's something that we also provide as part of our spectrum availability analysis service to give you more insight into how things might look in the future. And then the last piece and to touch on the CommScope offering is the CPI training. As I mentioned, CPIs are required for all outdoor category B CBSDs and for category A CBSDs that are unable to self-locate. And that means they are unable to determine their latitude and longitude and provide that to the SAS within the accuracy limits that are specified by the FCC. And that's plus or minus 50 meters in the XY direction, plus or minus 6 meters in the elevation or Z direction. So in most cases, a CPI is required to certify that the data that the CBSD has for installation parameters are correct. They've been collected within the guidelines and procedures outlined by WinForum and the FCC and provided to the SAS. So in order to become a CPI, there's a training program that's been set forth and prescribed by the FCC and by WinForum. And that then WinForum has certified about 5 companies, I think, at this point that are training program administrators that have training programs that have been approved to certify installers as CPIs. So CommScope offers our version of that training course. It's an all online self-paced course where once you register, there's a series of modules that you can take, video modules that you can take online at your leisure, at your pace. When that's complete, there's an exam that you take. It's a proctored exam. You pass that exam and you get basically your certification. And now that CPI has an ID that is registered in a WinForm database distributed to all SASs, so that CPI can now perform the duties and roles and responsibilities of a CPI, and all SASs would know about their status. You can take a CPI from any of the training program administrators. You can take the course, and that will be applied to all SASs. If you're trained by CommScope as a CPI, it doesn't mean you can only install on the CommScope SAS. It's applicable to all SASs. So there's a link there if you're interested in becoming a CPI, but it's something that there's 1,000 or so CPIs today, I believe, and that number is going up as more and more people are starting to deploy CBSDs associated with CBRS. So that's kind of the overview of the CommScope offering, the pieces of our CBRS puzzle. So turn it back over to Rashid.
Thanks, Andrew. So the next couple of slides here, talk about the onboarding process. So that's pretty simple, but we have folks in our operations team, which is run by Andrew, who are always there to help you. For every new customer, we usually have a kickoff meeting where we walk through all our commercial and technical processes, and somebody is usually assigned to every customer to sort of walk them through the integration process and at least help them bring up a couple of CBSDs and get them to the point where they're comfortable with the integration process on their own. So there are two parts of the onboarding process. This is the radio access network, or the RAN side. So when you go on to your Telrad BreezeView portal, you will see that CommScope SAS is an option to select as your SAS provider. So there you will basically select CommScope in BreezeView as your SAS. The CBSDs are then provisioned to connect to the SAS, and so basically the CBSDs has to know the URL that they're going to reach where the SAS is located, and there are some other details around licenses, around certificates, etc. That we can walk you through in more detail. And then once that provisioning is done, once the radios are provisioned, then basically the CBSDs will connect to the SAS. They will register, and it's basically the CBSD's job to request different channels. Different vendors have different designs. Some might even request multiple channels or all the channels, and then the SAS, based on all the different information that it knows, that Andrew covered quite a bit of that, based on what's available and all the other FCC rules around CBRS, the SAS will assign a channel to the CBSD, and then it basically operate as like any other radio from there on. But they do have to keep this heartbeat going at any time, at all times, and if that connection drops, then there's a very brief period. I think it's 5 minutes. If you go beyond that, then the radio basically, if it can't reach the SAS, it has to stop transmitting. On the SAS side of things, so different equipment providers have different ways of handling this. The way Telred and CommScope work together is the commercial relationship is directly between the operator and us. So you'll basically, depending on how large your network is, we might execute an MSA, Master Services Agreement, or we may not. If you have, less than a few hundred, or less than, let's say, if you're not a very big operator and you don't have any requirements to have an MSA, then we won't impose one on you either. So MSA, is varies from customer to customer. We will work with you on estimating your SAS usage for the year, and then we'll ask you to issue us a sort of a blanket PO for the based on that estimated usage, and that's how we will bill you. But the billing is done based on your actual usage. So on your first month, you might only have 20 CBSDs, and the next month you might have 30 or 40. So you'll only be billed based on your actual usage. We also have credit card and these other options where you can prepay and not have to worry about issuing a purchase order and so on. We will, once we onboard you on the SAS side, we'll create a master user account for you, provide you all the information that you're going to need to on the SAS side, where you can also use our portal to go and look at your CBSDs, where they're deployed, which ones are registered, which ones are, if there are any issues, you can see some of that information there. So all of that information is provided to you once we have that commercial relationship set up. So we're not going to cover the transition process in detail here. Anyone that's interested in walking through that in detail would be happy to have a one-on-one discussion with you, or set up a call. We might actually do a CommScope webinar on that as well, given the timeline and the deadline coming up in short order here. But today I just wanted to touch on it on a very high level and mention a couple of important points. You can also go on our website, and CommScope's website, and I have URL at the bottom of the screen there. We had done a very detailed blog. Usually we're not allowed to have a blog longer than 1 page. I think this one was 6 pages with some diagrams and so on, describing the whole process step by step, and a lot of intricate rules that go into play. So I think the first question that anybody's going to have is if they have grandfathered status, when does that end? And you might have a license that might have a date of 2025, but like I said, there are many different factors that you have to consider to actually understand when is it that you need to transition. So we have experts on our team. Mark Gibson is one that you might have heard of. He understands all the FCC rules very, very well, and usually CBRS Alliance, Wind Forum, even some government agencies consult with Mark and our CommSearch team on a lot of these things. So you're basically coming to the source. So if you have any questions that you can't get a straight answer on, or you're getting contradicting information from different sources, always contact us, and we can help you resolve that or help your understanding there. So one item that I do want to highlight is that if you have grandfather status, and let's say between now and October, you might want to start using CBRS while you still have your grandfather status, and want to make sure that the SAS functionality and all of the CBRS mechanisms in your network are going to work well before you lose your grandfather status. You might want to do that, but depending on the area you're in, if there are FSS providers, if there are other incumbents there may not be that many CBRS channels to go around, and a SAS might see your GWPZ location there and may not give you any CBRS status, any CBRS channels, saying, oh, well, there's a GWPZ there and there's an FSS there, and because of that, you can't get a channel. Well, you are that GWPZ, so the SAS should have the smarts to know that this is the same operator requesting to get a CBRS channel. So we've developed some special features to address that. So that's a problem that you won't have if you use our SAS for the during this transition period. This last slide on this topic here covers our pricing. So this is our standard pricing. This is not that special offer that I mentioned in the beginning. That's yet to come in a subsequent slide. So this is just our standard pricing. So for most Telrad customers, you're going to have a high power CPE at your subscriber locations, and that CPE is which is shown at the right hand side of this diagram. That CPE is also going to be a CBSD, and that CPE communicates through a base station, of course, and the base station itself is also a CBSD. That's how basically the fixed wireless communication works, and both of these CBSDs are connecting to the SAS. The way our pricing works is so this is provided that you don't have any mobile users or you don't have any end user devices that are not CBSDs. Those are low power EUDs, like something like you would get from Cradlepoint, for example. So if you don't have any of those devices, all you have is, let's say, Telrad CPE and Telrad base station. Those are the only type of equipment that you have in your network. Then our pricing is very, very simple. You just pay $2.10 for every subscriber per month, and you don't pay anything else. So very simple model. If you have other types of devices, then we have other pricing components. But contact us if you have a different type of network and you have any questions. But this is this is a very simple model. So now we're getting kind of towards the end here. So this was the main purpose of this webinar, to walk you through why you should select CommScope as your SAS provider. So I'll walk through this, and then we'll get into the offer that I brought up earlier. So I think one of our main differentiators is we really are very different from other leading SAS providers. We are not a startup that's surviving on investment from quarter to quarter. We are a well-established company. We have about 11 to 13 billion in annual revenue. We have partners in 150 countries. We've been around for 40 years, and we have 35,000 employees. We're spending 800 million annually on R&D alone. So a very large company that has to keep its commitments. If you sign a contract with us, we're not going to disappear in a month or in a year. And we're also well established in the telecom industry. We're not, our core business is not, search engines or harvesting customer data for, other artificial intelligence and so on. We are an old-fashioned telecom company to whom customer data is, really, really important, and we never touch that. That's the, something that we stay clear of, because that's wireless communications and is our bread and butter, and we don't mess with that. So you feel very safe in terms of privacy and any of those respects. Andrew talked about our TL9000 certification. We really feel, I personally firmly believe that we have the best customer service of all the SaaS providers that are out there. You will, like Andrew mentioned earlier, you will always have a real human at the other end speaking to you. I feel we really provide red carpet service to each and every customer that calls us, that gets in touch with us. So we don't have, you don't have to send us an email and expect a response in 24 or 48 hours. We don't, we don't have a small team that's running wild all over the country and trying to grab as much business as possible. It's a very organization that has a structure, and our goal is to provide excellent customer service to every customer. And you'll hear that if you've worked with us before, or if you talk to any of our customers, I think they will attest to that. I went over our cost or our pricing in the previous slide. We believe we are the cost leader. Our cost is the lowest of all the leading SaaS providers that actually have a SaaS and ESC network. There are new entrants that might be offering something lower, but they don't have ESC networks. They don't have a SaaS that has gone through the rigor like ours has, and we can provide you reliable service as well. We have the pre-planning tool that we don't believe anybody else has, the spectrum availability analysis tool that Andrew went over. That's certainly one of our differentiators, and something that our customers find really helpful, especially for greenfield networks or anybody getting into CBRS. They want to get a firm understanding of the type of channels they'll be able to get, or if there's any spectrum for them to have, or what are the risks involved for them from incumbents becoming active in their area and so on. So we provide all of that. Our track record speaks for itself. We've been around for 40 years. We've done mission critical deployments for decades, and this is not our first rodeo. We know how to develop and support systems like these. So we have a 3-tiered support teams that have been around for many years, and very experienced people supporting you there. We are the SaaS provider for, this slide says, one of the largest US tier 1 carriers, but there are multiple that have signed up with us and are using our SaaS service. One that did publicly announce is AT&T. So if a SaaS service that's good for AT&T should be good enough for anybody else in the country. AT&T, as you know, is a very large carrier, and they go through rigorous process of testing and verification, and they have some very heavy requirements that we have to follow beyond the FCC rules, and you will be getting that same service that AT&T is getting if you sign on to our SaaS. Our expertise is well known in the industry. Our CommSearch team, CommScope's CommSearch division, has been doing this for 4 decades. Spectrum access system is basically the automation of the spectrum management services that we have already been providing for many years. And we're bringing that same expertise in our algorithms, in how we have implemented the SaaS. So you're getting the service from the best in the industry there. Our SaaS and ESC, as we mentioned in the beginning, are fully certified. We were in the first wave of certification. And then we will, if you participate in CBRS Alliance, Win Forum, in any of these spectrum related industry or even governmental organizations, you'll see us there. Recently, we were invited by the U.S. Senate to as a witness on different questions that were coming up in terms of spectrum in the U.S. and we are viewed as an expert in that area. And now finally, the offer that that I mentioned a few times during our call. So we're very excited about this. We view Telrad as a important partner. We have a great working relationship with Alex, Ishai, and many others, and we've worked very closely with Telrad to make sure that the integration between our two systems goes smoothly, and any Telrad customer signing on to our SAS will not face any issues. And we're excited about what Telrad is doing, and we think that there's a great potential in the next few months that with all everything that they have on their roadmap and they're deploying, they're going to be great opportunities for everybody. So we want to jump in front of that and make sure that Telrad customers are aware of us, and they at least test out our service and use it and see what we're claiming is actually true. So for that, we're basically putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak. So we're offering 3 months of free SAS ESC service to all Telrad customers, and this is anytime between now and December 31st. If you sign up for CommScope SAS ESC service, you're going to get 3 months of. So you could potentially join on December 31st if you're not ready yet, and you'll get all of January, February, March of 2021 free for CommScope SAS. And after you use our service, if you're not happy for any reason, or you want to switch just because to somebody else, you are free to do that. There's not going to be any kind of obligation there. So that's why we wrote there no strings attached. That's for you to try our service, see what it's all about, and if you're happy, then you can keep it, and that's our hope, right? We want to be your SAS provider as opposed to anybody else. And I think that's pretty much it. With that, our contact information is there. I'm sure it'll also be circulated by Alex and Taryn when they put out the follow-up of this webinar. Alex, with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome, thank you, Rashid. Andrew, Rashid, I think your IT guys don't like you. They canceled your, they suspended your password for Exchange in the middle of the presentation.
Oh, we saw some kind of warning there? Huh.
Anyways, all right, guys, we're almost at the end of the we're almost at the end of the presentation. I'm gonna do something unorthodox, and I'm gonna go through our slides. I just want to talk a little bit about where we are and answer some of the questions. So as far as Telrad, we have completed, or we have migrated pretty much most of the portfolios. There is a CPI 7000 that never became part of the CBRS portfolio. Unfortunately, towards the end of the year 2019, we had to kind of exit out. The rest is fully CBRS compliant. Our BreezeView piece of software is continue being developed, function being added, improved, performance being dramatically improved in past month. Improved and optimized. So we find it to be the strategically right move for our customers to make sure that there is a continuity. So gentlemen, I do have a few questions. One from Steven. Steve, I have sent you a link to the document. Basically, your license expires October 17, 2020. So that's it. So like Rashid mentioned earlier, it's worthwhile to start testing water. It's not plug and play. It does take a little bit of integration involved and updating software to make sure that you transition networks. So you want to do it while you do have time, and we're here to support you as well. As far as we as a Telred as our support group. Now, another question from Mike. If CommScope is planning, Rashid, and this is towards you, if CommScope is planning to deploy an ESC network for Hawaii, if so, will all DPA be covered? Any timeline?
I can answer that. Hawaii is on our roadmap for ESC deployments. However, we don't have a firm schedule established with that yet. We're working to understand the market priority and who is interested there. Anything we deploy in Hawaii would cover all the DPAs because it is such a small area. And if you're going to put up one ESC, you might as well put up a few to cover the entire thing. I would note that you can deploy in Hawaii today without an ESC. You're just limited to the upper 50 megahertz of the band. You will need an ESC deployed to grab the lower 100. But we'd love to talk to you more about your priorities and your market needs, and such that we can adjust ours to meet those.
Awesome. So what happens after October? You still can operate in upper 50, or the whole access to 3.5 gig is basically X'd out?
No, even after October, then Part 96 would apply to the upper 50. So then in October, some of the Part 90 licenses would lose their status, but they're welcome to transition to Part 96, but they just operate in the upper 50 megahertz because there's no ESC to allow operation in the lower until that ESC is installed.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Mike, so any additional questions, feel free to, if you don't have contact information for Andrew and Rashid, please send email to us, to Telred, either to sales or marketing, and we will pass through those communications over to the right people on the CommScope side. Then we do have a couple questions from Dan, and I know we are kind of stepping over one hour slot, so I'm not going to be too upset if you guys are going to be jumping off, but there are some good questions coming up. So please let us know if CommSearch database will be exposed to BreezeView. Okay, so no, the data that's being interfaced from BreezeView between SAS and BreezeView is purely limited within CBSDs. So we're talking about the CBSD ID, obviously the geolocation, so the azimuth and so on, but that's about it. Data is pretty, it's purely about the device and its location and some of its parameters. That's that question. Interesting. For crowded CBRS, another question from Dan. So for crowded CBRS environments, for CommScope SAS, will there be any transparency or audit trail info for grants that your SAS has given out?
I can try to answer that. I think that there's a question there is, it's crowded and I'm trying to get grants. I'm not getting a grant, or, how do I know? Is there any information you can provide on that? So if a grant is not allowed because of incumbent interference, if the GAA grant is interfering with a PAL or with a tier 1 incumbent, the SAS includes that information in the grant response. Basically, it says that grant is denied because you're interfering with an FSS site. The SAS will often provide you with a recommendation. There's an optional ops param, they call it operational parameters field in the response message from the SAS that would say, yeah, you can't have that grant because you're interfering with this site, but try this channel or this power level to help with that. So that's included in the grant messages for areas where it's the grant would not be allowed by the SAS. As far as knowing, I think the second part of the question, for for grants that other people may have, or grants that are in place. The FCC privacy rules permit us from disclosing information about other users per se, and what they're doing with the spectrum. However, the spectrum inquiry message that a CBSD can make into the SAS, it can ask what spectrum is available, and the SAS would provide information about what spectrum could be used for a grant request.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew. And we have another question from Anu. You mentioned power backup at your ESC sites. How long does it last? That was part of the question. Second part, could you please talk a little bit more about coexistence algorithms?
You bet. So the first question's easy. The power backup, we have about 48 hours of battery life at each of the ESC sites. That's usually long enough to ride through any short-term power outage, but it's also long enough for us to mobilize and deploy a generator if we need to. We have generators and vendors kind of pre-loaded all across the country so that we can get a generator there within 24 hours if we need to, and keep that site up and running. In fact, we did that with Hurricane Laura and the Gulf. We have a few sites that still are without power, but we have generators that are running on those to keep the ESC sites up. The second piece on coexistence, that could be a whole nother webinar. Coexistence is basically trying to optimize the GAA user space such that you can optimally use that spectrum and optimize how much spectrum everybody has without interfering with one another. There is no interference protection afforded by the FCC today for GAA users. GAA users are getting the spectrum for free. They're kind of at the bottom of the tier, and the FCC says, it's basically at your own risk. However, that's something that industry is trying to work out on their own. A lot of the CBRS Alliance, the Wind Forum, the SAS providers are working on methods to optimize that GAA spectrum. And it's basically, very briefly, what it's doing is it's looking at all the GAA users, computing their coverage area, determining what sites overlap in coverage, and then trying to come up with a frequency plan that would minimize any interference for those overlap areas. So it's using things like graph theory and greedy algorithms for spectrum that are trying to optimize colors in a graph database and trying to determine what the best frequency plan would be there. In some cases, some of the methods that have been proposed may reduce the bandwidth for some users in order to give everybody a chance. If somebody's using 40 megahertz, in some cases, they may cut back to 30 megahertz so that somebody else could get in. A lot of that is still up in the air. It's still being worked out. It's expected to be deployed next year, but the final configuration, the algorithm, the rules for that are still being worked out in industry.
Awesome. Andrew, you are the best, and Rashid too. So on that note, we would like to finalize the webinar. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us, everybody, spending this hour educating and learning more. Thank you, Rashid, for sharing the pricing and a little bit more insights, because that was part of that nuance that people kind of didn't have access for the information before, and we appreciate you opening up and becoming, sharing this info.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Thank you for having us. This was a great discussion, and I think a great opportunity for us to be in the forefront and be more visible to your customers.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We will have webinar. Well, it's been it was recorded. It's been recorded. It will be available for everybody who's attended. And any additional questions, feel free to send it offline to us, and we'll be able to answer them as they come. Thanks, everybody, and have a nice week.
Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.